Hey, Drew, welcome to the show.
Hey Shannon, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Would you mind just introducing yourself real quick for those listening?
Yeah, my name is Drew Faloon. I'm out here in Colorado Springs specifically. I was born and raised, and I always kind of joke with people that I'm kind of a minority nowadays because people always are coming to Colorado and moving here. So a little bit of a minority, but I am a certified financial planner with Intrepid Wealth Partners. We're an independent RIA, meaning we're not associated with a particular firm or anything like that. Been in the industry for about 6.5 years, and I started out my industry or my career with a big insurance firm for about 5 years and transitioned about a year ago, actually a year ago in August here, to go on the independent side of things just to allow me more flexibility, more options for my clients and everything. And then beyond that, on the personal side of things, being out here in Colorado, I kind of have to do this, but I'm an avid hiker. I love, if you're familiar with Colorado, there's 14ers. They're 14,000 foot peaks, and I've actually completed all of the 14ers here in Colorado. So
Wow.
it's it's a little bit of an obsession of mine beyond the financial planning.
I love that. All right, you need to come down and visit me in Costa Rica and go hiking on the
Definitely.
volcanoes. Absolutely. So, okay. So you mentioned that you're a certified financial planner, a CFP. Now, before we get into any of the stuff we're going to talk about, I just want to level set on what the hell that means because there's a lot of alphabet soup getting thrown around out there. There's a
Mhm.
lot of letters and there's a lot of different. I get these questions all the time from people who listen to the show and say, "Hey, like what is the name of the thing that I need? I have these types of questions and these types of problems. What is the person?" And more often than not, I actually say you should probably find a CFP or a financial planner, financial advisor. What do all these words mean to you? Because you are the one who really can define them for our listener.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing out there, like you said, the alphabet soup that goes along with it.
Hmm.
But when we're looking at the landscape of financial planning and financial advising are really synonymous, right? And so when most people that's something that people are familiar with, at least, is financial planning. But what
Yep.
people don't realize is within that, there's a lot of different categories, right? Technically, somebody who is an insurance agent could be a financial planner, right? They could call themselves a financial planner. So they could be selling life insurance and stuff like that, and they could be a financial planner, as well as somebody could also be in asset management. So they could be, hey, I'm managing your 401k or IRA. Technically, that's a financial planner. But then when we're really looking at financial planning, in my opinion, it's really the full grasp of things, right? So looking at insurance, cash flow, investment, debt management, taxes, estate planning, really the full side of things. And so the CFP, certified financial planner, is kind of the gold standard, I would say, within financial planning because it's extremely difficult to get. And really, what it does is it takes you through all of those different aspects of financial planning. You have to do a couple different things. You have to have enough experience, you have to have education, you have to take an exam, which is a pain in the butt. And then there's an ethics portion. So,
Hmm.
within financial planners, within those different categories, there are different regulations that go along with that. And with the CFP and being a financial planner, I have some extra ethical regulations that I go along with it on top of just the industry knowledge that I got going through that program. And then, honestly, I think there's probably hundreds of designations you can get for different specialties and everything like that. The CFP is kind of that overarching one where if someone's got their CFP, you probably know they're serious because again, it took me about a year and a half to get it, and it cost me a lot of money. So, I if I'm going to do something like that, I'm probably not going to skip out on going into a different industry or something like that.
Yeah, it's an indicator of investment in education and the credential to elevate what it is that you do. It's no different than a CPA, I think, in terms of, I mean, the requirements are pretty similar with the education, the ethics, the exam, but also what people don't realize is that not everyone is a CFP, even if they say I'm a financial advisor. I feel like the boundary, what do you call it? The barrier to entry is really low to just call yourself a financial advisor because that's kind of a generic term. Saying accountant or tax expert or tax preparer, it really doesn't hold any sort of barrier to entry for that identity. So you have to be careful though with some bad actors that are putting themselves out there as financial advisors, especially, sharing advice and things like that. One of the things that the regulators do is they try not to, they really are cautious about education because education can turn into advice real quick. So we disclaim the crap out of this episode, and you guys know that Nothing we talk about here is personal financial advice. It's all about education and being aware of what's out there. We're not telling you what to eat. We're just telling you what's at the buffet. Okay.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
not telling you what to eat. I'm just telling you what's at the buffet and what I particularly enjoyed.
Yep.
That does not mean you have to go get it. Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
So, so with that under our belts, let's go through a couple of the things that, you help people with as a CFP. One of the ways that you've articulated this to me in our conversations has been really, it's refreshing because for business owners, they're constantly in this state of hustle. They're constantly in this state of the next thing, or tell me what to do, or this strategy, that strategy. Oh, I heard from so and so that I need to get into crypto, I need to get into commodities, I need to get into real estate, whatever it is. But in the effort to make money, yes, but they lose touch with the whole reason why they're doing it, or getting educated on it. So can we talk a little bit about choosing a strategy in terms of wealth building and what you should be considering and what should be kind of the paramount factors in how you kind of plan out your financial future?
Yeah, and then just as you said, with entrepreneurs and business owners, there it's always go. And that frankly, that's one of the reasons I love working with them because that's the same way I am. Like I love ideas, I love going for stuff and everything. The problem with that is there's all these shiny objects out there, right? And just as we were talking about earlier, you could be getting advice from somebody who may not even be qualified to be able to give that advice, right? You may think, yeah, they're a financial planner, but do they actually know this stuff, or are they just being told by their manager or something like that that they need to do that? And so my first advice to people is typically, let's pump the brakes a little bit, let's slow down. And before we start talking about all these different strategies out there, let's talk about you first and foremost. Let's get to know you on an individual level, what your values are, obviously what your goals are, what your concerns are. If you're a business owner, why'd you start the business, right? What does the past look like? What does the present look like? And ultimately, what does the future look like? Because that's going to open up a lot of clarity into things. Because I come across a lot of people that, they, on the balance sheet, they may look very successful. They have a lot of cash flow coming in, they have assets, all this type of stuff, but they're miserable. Right? They may be on their third marriage or third divorce. They may be, overweight, not very healthy, all that type of stuff. And so the reason I bring that up is my whole intention with pumping the brakes a little bit is to slow down and understand them on an individual level. So when we're looking at those strategies, we can align it with who they are personally, right? And typically when we do that, those different strategies are going to become more obvious. I wouldn't say 100% obvious, but they're going to become more obvious of like, oh yeah, maybe like this aligns a little bit more with my overall goals compared to this option, right? It's not just about making more money, right? Although that's an aspect of it. It's really about, again, creating this overarching, financial plan that ultimately serves you on an individual basis.
Yeah, it's about adding intention to the mix too, because I know so many people who had a strategy they used, it worked, and they got wealthy from it, but then they don't know when to shift or when to change that strategy, or they just think, oh, I just have to keep doing this. And you actually have to evolve with the tide of what's going on, and you have to know why you chose that strategy when you did with your goals. Because if you use, let's just say, for example, my dad told me when I was 22, when I got my first job, he was like taxes. He goes, it is a requirement for you to put 12% in your 401k. Like he told me that was like a thing that just put that there. That's what you're supposed to do. Like I was filling out my W-4, right, with my information. And then I go to do my 401k and he's like, yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, okay. And lo and behold, like 10 years later, I go, wait a minute, everyone doesn't do this. And then I was like, you son of a, oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me that in 2008, Dad. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
But what happened was I realized that you can take that advice, even if you had Michael Keene, my father, even if you had him to be like, just go do this. Well, that's not going to work forever, because very soon thereafter, if I wasn't savvy enough with finances, very soon thereafter, I would have been like, oh shit, I'm putting 12% of my salary in a 401k. And I don't really don't know what to put that in. I don't know what to be invested in. I don't know what my options are. I don't even know if I would rather have the cash flow now than I would rather put it away in retirement. What does this actually mean? And how should I be changing that strategy as I evolve my financial future? Because I'll tell you what, Shannon at, God, how old am I? 38. Shannon at 38 and Shannon at 22 are very different people in
Yeah.
terms of their goals. So let's talk about like defining that goal for yourself in your financial future, because I think that's overwhelming to the person who's listening right now and saying, hey, I don't know what I'm going to want. I don't know what 60-year-old me is going to want. I don't know what I should be planning for. It's all very much a hypothetical, abstract bubble to me. How do I distill that down into, identifying those values, identifying those goals? Like, how can I create that from what feels like a very abstract future?
Yeah, I would say the first step would be to look backwards, right? Kind of what I was saying with pumping the brakes.
Hmm.
Look backwards. It's not going to be, the full picture of things, but typically by looking backwards, that's evidence, right? That's what we
Hmm.
have and we can look at. And I would ask questions as far as when were you the most happy, right?
Hmm.
What moments do you remember? Who are the people you were with that brought you the most joy, right? When do you remember a big smile on your face? Those type of things are going to give you like, first of all, most people don't even think about that, right? And secondly, it's going to give you some clarity to be like, I want to create more of those memories, right? And just as you said, Shannon, obviously life is going to change, so it's not a perfect picture to say, oh, exactly what brought me joy 10 years ago is going to give me joy 10, 20, 30 years down the road. But it's a good starting point. And then as far as identifying those goals and then ultimately the strategies, I always say flexibility is key. And you kind of brought this up in your story, Shannon, of when I started out, it was like, let's put money in the 401k, in the Roth IRA, all that type of stuff. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but I kind of realized like it kind of tied me up, especially being a business owner as things continued to grow. I couldn't touch that Roth IRA. I couldn't touch that 401k. And so, again, it's not steering you away from those traditional methods, but really looking at things. And if you can create that flexibility of all these different, and the buzzword that's thrown around is diversification, right? And they typically
Right.
say that in regards to like a portfolio, but I would even say diversification in regards to the type of accounts you have, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to have all your money tied up in a 401k. And if one bad thing happens, or maybe it's the opposite thing where an opportunity comes about and you're like, dang, I don't got any money to be able to put towards this because it's all in my 401k. Those are kind of the two principles that I would start out with to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paying your present and paying your future at the same time,
Yep.
because we're taught, I mean, us millennials, we're taught, save up for the rainy day, save up. And I think we're slowly kind of coming out of this matrix of saving is going to save us. It's like, it's really not. You can't just save your way to wealth. And when you were describing that about like the different options available, I was thinking about it's if your parents only fed you vanilla ice cream and you're like, it's great. It's all I know, but there are so many other varieties out there and there's so many
Yeah.
other things you might like better. But it's not to say you shouldn't have vanilla. It's just maybe you also like chocolate. Like maybe you also like strawberry. So you have to actually go out there and learn about what else is available to you to make an educated decision to continue doing the thing that you're doing, right?
Absolutely. And I like that analogy of the ice cream too, because I think another important point to mention is us as financial advisors and really other industries are supposed to be filters of information.
Hmm.
So our client's job is not to go out there and necessarily try every single piece of possible ice cream flavor and everything like that. Frankly, our jobs as financial advisors is to go out there and find again that vision for them, try to uncover that vision for them, and then be like, okay, based off what you're telling me, yeah, you're a vanilla and chocolate type of person. Like, we need to look at these particular strategies, right? Because
Hmm.
frankly, there's millions of strategies out there, and you don't want to be overwhelmed and inundated with all those different pieces of information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then let me just double down on this analogy because it's fun. It is like you go to like a sorry life insurance people, but you go to like a life insurance focused brokerage and it's just like they're like pistachio is freaking amazing. You don't need anything else ever. This is everything you're going to ever need. And I tend to say, and tell me if you agree, but I just tend to say if somebody is they're selling a product and they're not asking you more questions about what you want, if they're just trying to like find a way to sell you that one thing, that one strategy, if they have one flavor in the freezer, I'm like, run, because that means that they're interested in is you buying that flavor and they're not interested in finding the right ones for you.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I grew up on that side of things, right? That was the first
Hmm.
5 years of my industry. And I was always kind of like a fish out of water within that industry, within that particular, more of the commission based side of things. But
Hmm.
100%, it's kind of the same thing where if like, if you're taught to be a hammer, you're going to think everything's a nail, right? And it's like, yeah, that's how you're taught, right? Like one of the things I was first taught is know thy comp, maximize thy comp, right? Those were the two things. And it's like, I get that, right? We got to make money
Yeah.
and everything like that.
Incentive.
But but if that's your only focus on things, yeah, you're going to think whatever policy or solution or whatever is going to be the end all be all for everybody. And so if you're seeing that stuff, yeah, I would, like you said, run the other way or ask additional questions. And, it's usually pretty easy to distinguish the commission breath when you're seeing it.
Yeah, and I think people are becoming more savvy and more attuned to those things now because I think people are realizing how custom this stuff has to be. But there's a lot of people trying to shortcut the answers to questions by going on social media, going on YouTube, and trying to learn these things in the name of self education. But I think there's also a degree of, yes, you can self educate a lot, which is amazing. It's a blessing that we have all this technology and we have this accessibility to information. However, I do think that there is a ton of value in having someone who can use that judgment on your behalf and also can help you save some time with some of that research, identifying what might be good for you and pointing you in the right direction so you're not wasting time on strategies that don't make any sense for you, that might be out of your element or just for a different type of goal. What role does the professional play in today's society of AI, an abundance of YouTube videos and such? Like, how do you help distill this down, or what do you recommend people do to interact with both of those things simultaneously?
Yeah, well, kind of going along with what we're talking about, the ice cream, the fun ice cream
Mhm.
analogy and everything
Yeah.
like that. I kind of equate that to people's financial religion, right? We all have this belief system we were growing up in. It's typically because of our parents or maybe our actual religion society that we were raised up in. And that's going to have us think a certain type of way. The issue
Mhm.
comes about when specific financial advisors have their own religion, just as we were talking about, whether they're raised up on the insurance side of things or the investment side of things. And so my suggestion to you would, I mean, obviously talk to the different professionals that you have. And I think a good key to that is if you're a professional, like if we're talking about financial planning, if you're a professional, that financial planner is looking to communicate with your other professionals, right? The fractional CFO, the CPA, the estate planning attorney, that's usually a pretty good sign because all of those things go together, right? And I think it's important too, with what we were talking about earlier in regards to understanding, that past and then that future. As great it is to have this information society where we can research anything, Google anything, that person on Reddit doesn't know your situation. That person on Facebook does not know your. I see that all the time, right? Where somebody will say, here's a breakdown of my situation, and then somebody will go into a long rant of, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and it's like, who is this person? Like, you have no idea who they are or what their incentive is or anything like that. And so, I would just be, obviously informed of that stuff. It doesn't hurt to research that, but I think that's the value of having a human to be like, hey, I heard this on Reddit or saw this on YouTube or whatever. What do you think about it, right? How do you think it applies to my overall situation? I think that's going to be the key for stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about getting financial advice, it's so important to find, somebody who has credibility, authority, and can speak to that and also relate to your particular situation. And going bouncing off of what we were talking about with your own personal goals, right? Your own personal things that bring you joy, the things that you want to do. Can we just go through maybe some examples of ways that we can relate real goals into the financial future? Because I know that, let's translate this though, because when people say, when we say, I don't know if you encounter this with your clients, but when I say, hey, what are your goals? Immediately, every one of my clients tries to throw a dollar sign and a number out there at me, and they'll say 2 million in sales. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm asking.
Yeah.
But I realize contextually, you look at me and go, girl wants a dollar sign answer. No, like I'm not just talking in math. Like, what are your goals? So can we talk about like how to identify those goals and communicate them and figure out like what are the relevant goals you should be telling your financial planner, not just with dollar signs on them?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, part of that is on the financial advisor, and I think the key
Yeah.
question is just why, right? Like, if somebody
Yeah.
comes and they say $2 million in sales, well, why, right? And then you may get a little bit annoyed because I'm going to keep asking why until we get
Yeah.
to actually the core of that, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's the most important piece, is to really get to the core of something. But to give a specific example, and I think it's important that all of these things go together. So I think that's important that we lay out all of the goals, right? Long term, mid term, short term, all that type of stuff, because a specific strategy could be relevant in the short term, but could be detrimental in the long term, right? So understanding all that stuff I think is really important that goes along with that. But if someone comes to me and they're talking about that stuff, when we get to the core, right? And maybe they want to get to that $2 million in sales, because in that particular example, because they know on the cash flow side of things, they're going to be able to pay themselves a certain amount of monthly salary as the owner and everything like that. And then ultimately that's going to allow them to be able to take, a 1 month vacation or something like that. That's super, super important for me to know, because obviously, if we're talking about a 1 month vacation, liquidity, safety, flexibility are going to be extremely important compared to, yeah, we want to grow wealth for the long term. But if you're looking at doing that, or something like buying a second home or a vacation home or something like that, those are going to be things that we're going to have to juggle all these impeding priorities. And ultimately, it comes back to cash flow, right? It comes back to cash flow. And obviously, somebody in your position, Shannon, is going to help them out with the business cash flow. But then ultimately, how does that obviously flow into the personal cash flow? And I think you hit the nail on the head with saying intentionality, right? How can we be intentional with that? So if one of those core goals of yours is, buy that house or something like that, then we can be intentional with your cash flow, be able to set some money aside in a particular fund or a particular investment or whatever that may look like, that gets you to that goal, balancing it with everything else. So it's all that balancing act, right? You have to look at the full picture of it. But again, like I said, I think the important part is getting to the core of it and bringing it back to cash flow ultimately.
Yeah, it's always about cash flow. I mean, like,
Yes.
spoiler alert, guys, everything's about cash flow. This
Yes.
whole damn podcast is about cash flow, but it comes down to, as my mentor Mel Abraham says, it's the earnings machine, which is what we help with, and then the money machine, which is what Drew helps with.
Yep.
So the money machine is really the wealth building machine. What we want to make sure of as CFOs is to make sure you have enough money to put into that machine,
Yep.
so that you have enough that's being generated from your earnings to be able to do whatever you want with it when it comes to reaching your goals. And I always get asked these questions from clients of, hey, like, thank you for uneffing my cash flow. And how can I now, like, now what do I do? We have a little bit of excess cash in the bank. I think I can invest it. There's no better compliment and there's no better feeling for a fractional CFO than to have the client say, hey, I have extra cash. What do I do with it? And and I say, well, first of all, like, let's talk about business goals, personal goals, like, what's really coming up, like, is this something where you want to reinvest and you want to grow and scale the company, hire more people, or do you want to kind of harvest those plants? Do you want to use that to buy more seeds, to sow more seeds, or do you want to harvest? There's nothing wrong with either option, by the way. You
Yep.
can harvest some of it and then say, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go plant it over there, and I'm going to
Yep.
grow my wealth garden over there, and that's totally fine.
Mhm.
And what I find is a lot of people are guilty about paying themselves more out of their business because they feel like
Mm.
they should reinvest it. And then B, they're not really sure what to do with it once it exits the business, because they've only really known that all extra money shall go into growing the business. And we go back to that pumping the brakes, because I'm going, to what end?
Yep.
To what end will that
100%.
happen? When will that stop happening? And when will you actually just get to enjoy the fruits of your labor? So let's talk about that for a second. Do you encounter the same types of approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important that you bring that up, where there's kind of that guilt factor that goes along with, like, yeah, like, and what I see is it's a lot of like, the Joneses are doing it, right? Like my competition is doing this, or
Mhm.
I saw on another podcast or maybe a YouTube video or something, like somebody was doing this, I automatically have to do that. And I think it's important to ask, like, what is the purpose of this business? Like, you are creating this, you are grinding it out in the business. Why though? Again, that it comes back to that question, why? And if we can get to the core of that, it's ultimately a tool or a vehicle to serve you and your family and future generations, if that's a particular goal of yours. And so I think asking that question is going to be paramount from the get-go, and everything like that. And yeah, that's what I would say in regards to that. And I mean, I'm going to say this as well too. Like, I think business owners deserve so much. I'm not saying W-2 employees don't deserve anything or anything like
Yeah.
that, but I mean, you're risking your life savings, your time, time away from your family, all that type of stuff. You deserve to live an awesome life as long as you're being ethical and all that type of stuff. And so
Hmm.
do not feel guilty by taking money out of the business. But I think it is so, so important to have people in your corner that are communicating with each other, right? Because, if Shannon is over here and she knows on the business side of things, well, we need to set aside money in the business because there's a big purchase coming up or a big hire or something like that. Well, if a financial advisor is just completely blind to that, they may disagree with that, or they may take excess funds and say, hey, we're going to put it into this restricted asset that you don't have access to, and it could throw everything off. So like, I think you brought up a good point of balancing the personal and the business side of things. And then when it comes to the personal side of things, like, again, I'm going to continue to come back to it. Don't feel guilty about that stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's obviously a limit, right? There's a limit and a line to cross if you're doing too much, paying yourself exorbitantly and reducing that flexibility that you can have and everything like that. But I mean, you started this business for a reason. And like you said, enjoy the fruits of your labor at some point. I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely huge.
Yeah. And the point should be made that I'm going to just say this a little bit boldly for people who listen to this, to say you have a financial planner and it is you if you not have not hired one. So you are like, inaction is a financial plan,
Yep.
and investing in whatever YouTube told you is a financial plan. So you are enacting a financial plan every single day, whether you realize it or you don't. And the choice is yours, because to say, oh, well, I don't have a financial planner. Well, you are your own financial planner. It's like I say, you are your own bookkeeper or accountant if you don't have one, because you still have to, that you have money has to go somewhere. Money is flowing somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's coming in and it's going out, and you're making those decisions, and you have control over setting the destination, the GPS. You don't have to wait for someone to do it for you. You're going to do that on your own, but why not somebody who knows the route? Why not
Mm-hmm.
somebody who knows where the potholes are? Why not somebody who knows the fastest route to where you're trying to go? And that's the whole point of having a professional to help you. And you made a great point, which was to communicating with each other, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where a client patches up. I just picture those like Flex Seal, like the guy with like the duct tape on a freaking
Yeah, on a
tank of
boat.
water, right? So I'm like, they're just like patching up all these places where, oh, I have a CPA to handle, like I'm paying too much in taxes. CPA, smack the CPA on the thing. And then they go, okay, I need to grow my investments, like CFP over here. And then I need to do this thing over here. I need a tax attorney. Oh, I need a life insurance person. Oh, I need this person and an estate planner. And I go, okay, yes, I realize that you're not going to get like the perfect blend of all these things in one person. But because all of these disciplines, by the way, are an entire career of expertise. There's nobody who's good at all these things.
Yep.
But the thing is that you need somebody who can communicate in some way of keeping them all on the same page. And that
Yep.
is really freaking difficult,
It is.
because you won't know, most of the time you won't know what's relevant. You won't know what's relevant to tell people. Like I was working as a CPA with a client who had a CFP, and we had conflicting, to your point, we had conflicting advice. It was just like, well, the CFP says I should do this. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you to do this because you told me this one dimension of your goal. And you
Yep.
told her this one dimension of your goal. So we both went in different directions. Because like you said you were hungry, so I plotted you to go to McDonald's, and then now you're saying you need to go to the bathroom, so we plotted you to the gas station. Like,
Yep.
which is it? We're both right with the information we had.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we're not going to get you any closer to what you really want unless you're really clear about that to everybody.
100%. Yeah, and it creates so much inefficiency, especially as
Mm-hmm.
more complexity comes to it, more moving parts that go along with it, right? I see that all the time, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, right, there can be the insurance agent. Well, the insurance agent could do life insurance, annuities, property and casualty. They could also be doing, stuff that could be conflicting with the financial advisor that could be doing all that stuff. Sometimes I see CPAs that do investment management as well too.
Yeah.
If you have all those people that are disagreeing on that stuff, it's going to only hurt you in the long run. And it's going to create more frustration for you because ultimately what happens is that the advisors are going to get more frustrated,
Mhm.
right? And it's going to show at some point, and then ultimately your plan isn't going forward. So it's why the ultra wealthy have what's called family offices. They build these family offices where, I mean, for them, they specifically like have people on staff, have attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors on staff. Most people can't afford millions of dollars a year to obviously pay those people, but having that financial team in your corner that is communicating, not necessarily agrees on everything, but is at least like having that back and forth and knows what ultimately the like you said, that end destination is, that's going to make your life so much easier and it's going to make things so much more efficient. Because, like you said, when you're patching those things up, like ultimately you're trying to progress forward. When you're focused on patching things up, you're focused on patching things up, right? You're not moving the needle forward as fast as it should be, ultimately.
Yeah, and it goes back to the intention and being clear on that and being able to articulate it, and I think that the problem is that they find point solutions to point problems without really identifying the bigger problem or the bigger need, because and it's not your fault, guys, it's not your fault. Like, you've been told that if I need help with tax savings, I have to go to a tax strategist or a CPA, and then if I need help with investment planning, I need to go to somebody like Drew, like a CFP, and so I need all these different people, and it's like, yes and no, but I think that you have to start with somebody who's going to holistically look at your whole picture and go, let's prioritize. Let's talk about the importance of prioritization too, because I think that there's no shortage of ways for people to spend their money.
Yep.
There's no shortage of ways for you to invest, ways for you to spend money, ways for you to grow your wealth. So when it comes to selecting and distilling it down to the strategies you want to use, like you said, you don't have to buy every single flavor of ice cream. So let's
Mm.
talk about how many should you be implementing, let's say, what should drive that, and let's talk about prioritization of those things based on where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it ultimately comes back to, the values and the goals that we had talked about
Right.
previously and everything
Right.
like that. But beyond that, I mean, obviously, it really depends on the individual. As wealth accumulates and all that type of stuff, the beauty about that is the opportunities to accumulate more wealth increase as well too, right? And there's certain tax plays that can come into it and everything like that. So if I was talking to somebody that was, relatively early on in a business or just kind of starting out, I would focus on the basics and the simple stuff, right? Making sure you know, and we're going to come back to cash flow, right? Making sure you know what's happening on cash flow basis. And obviously, that's going to continue, right? We don't want to
Right.
ignore that cash flow side of things. So we have to pick up the pieces later down the road. But I always say one of the most important things you can do is simplify the battlefield, right? I come to like a lot of people come to me, and I always equate it to like that drawer that at least I have it, but I know a lot of people have that drawer in their kitchen. You open it up and it's just a mess, right? It's got like batteries and like manuals and everything like that. That's a lot of people's financial situation, and they may be
Yeah.
successful, but and they may have a lot of stuff happening, but it's like we said, it's not organized or planned or anything like that. So I would start with, if I was just starting out, and frankly, again, this is even a lot of people that are progressing and have a lot of money and everything like that, focus on cash flow and organization, right? Where are things? Like, where ultimately are things? Like, is there a policy over here? Is there an account over here? Let's just get things organized. And then, I mean, the landscape of what you can do on the investment side of things and the wealth building side of things is immense, right? There's
Right.
so many different things. And I think it's important to have somebody who's truly looking at all those options. And I think a really big key to that on the financial planning side of things, if somebody comes to you and maybe you ask them a question about, hey, I heard somebody else do this, or I have a question about this, and if they're like, you know what, I haven't worked in that yet, or I don't know 100% about that, I'm gonna have to bring somebody else for that. I think that's a green flag. I don't think that's a red flag, right? Now, obviously, if it's like simple stuff and they're like, I have no idea what I'm talking about, then that's an issue, but should be able to weed that out relatively quick. But the reason I say that is, again, there's so many different specialties. And just as you said, we can't know everything, right? I know enough about
Yeah.
taxes to be dangerous and open up opportunities, but I'm not a CPA. I don't intend to be a CPA or anything like that. And so maybe it's even bringing in other financial planners that work in alternative investing, or they work a lot in real estate, or whatever the case may be. I think if you hear that type of stuff, I mean, that I think that's a green flag in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's commonplace though in other fields like healthcare.
Mhm.
Think about primary care physician. I mean, how many times have I gone to my primary care physician just to be referred to the person who can actually solve my problem?
So true.
And I still go back to the primary care physician every time because they know the overall picture. They know this is who Shannon is, this is her body composition, this is her blood work, this is what's going on with her holistically. And then it's like, okay, Shannon, you hurt your knee. This literally happened. So like, you hurt your knee. Here's an ortho.
Yep.
Here's a physical therapist because we don't do that here. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't expect you to because you're just
Yep.
an internal medicine doctor, not just, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
So like you have this specialty, and I think what people don't realize is that finance is very similar, law is very similar. A lot of these professions are similar, where you really have to go deep on a specialization over the course of your career, so that people are really good at certain things and probably confidently mediocre at a lot of other things.
Yep.
And they also, and side note, guys, we're people pleasers too. We want to say yes to helping you. We want to help you.
100%.
And sometimes we're just not the best people to help you, even though we
100%.
really want to.
Yep.
So sometimes it is about finding that specialist and finding that person who can really lean into what it is you're trying to accomplish, even though you may like your professional as a person. You want to go, is this person the right person to serve the most prominent, high priority goals that I have? That's what's really
Yep.
important.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And that's absolutely key. So we covered a few different things here about around professionals, around getting help with these different goals, around how to identify some of these goals. Let's talk a little bit. Let's get into some specifics here. And I'm okay with like a scenario if we need to, because I know
Mhm.
stuff depends. But I
Yeah.
want to leave listeners with a good idea of, okay, so for example, illustrative purposes only, don't take this as advice, right?
Yep.
You've got somebody who I look at it as prioritization of different elements, right? Like we talk about cash flow. I talk about, do you have cash in the bank for a rainy day? Are you ready for, different economic cycles right now? Are you heavily dependent on certain things for cash? Are you stable in terms of your cash machine is working, which is where we come in.
Yep.
Then we go beyond that and say, okay, now I have a little bit of excess cash. Like, what do I do with it? What are some of the questions that you ask, Drew, from a business owner who is, besides like just the why, and I can answer that with a hypothetical if you need me to. But, when it comes to, I have some excess cash, what are my options on what I can do with it? And what are some wise things I should do or be considering?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you said, going beyond just the why aspect of it, I would ultimately say, and hopefully at this point, obviously we have the information of what else they have that goes along with it, right? Because if we
Right.
don't have that full picture that goes along with it, it's going to be extremely difficult that goes along with that. But I think a big question, especially for business owners, is the legacy side of things, right? Not only with their business, but ultimately, obviously, their life. A lot of people that I talk to that are on the business owner side of things, they really like the idea of, hey, I've built this, or I am building this. How can I use this grind period, this risk that I took, and obviously help myself out, but help other people, right? Family, friends, even like charity and everything like that. So I think that's a key thing that I keep coming across more and more is, obviously there's the whole discussion about exit planning beyond just, managing the funds after the fact and everything. But yeah, what does that look like for you? And I'm seeing more and more people ask questions in regards to that as well. And then frankly, I think a lot of the business owner market that I'm seeing too doesn't surprise me, but there's a lot of FOMO, right? Well, they'll talk to their buddy over here and they'll say, "Hey, I just did this thing, or I just did that thing. What do you think about that?" And so I think for that, it's looking at all of the different components. So not just the traditional, stocks, bonds, everything like that. It's looking into real estate, it's looking into syndications, it's looking into alternate investing, and obviously finding the different professionals that operate really well in that field. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think people get into owning a business for the freedom aspect, right? The freedom of time and money. And at the end of the day, one of the key components of that is creating that passive income, right? That passive income. And I think a business can be a great, if you build it intentionally, depending obviously on what business you're in, is a great way to do that, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we would like to build a business that can operate without you, where you can go and take a month long vacation or whatever, and you don't have to worry about coming back to a dumpster fire, right? But even looking out beyond that, right? And again, I know a lot of people look at real estate and everything like that. But those would be kind of the components when I'm talking to people is the estate planning and legacy side of things. And then also, like, again, it goes back to cash flow, obviously, but cash flow that is going to continue to build without that, not trading the time for money. I think that's the biggest
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it.
100%. Now, when it comes to tools to do this, right? You mentioned like mapping out where all your assets are and figuring out, how to, I mean, because I think that this can be overwhelming. Like you said, going through the drawer, the junk drawer, and actually organizing it, it feels daunting and overwhelming because been so long since we took a good hard look at this stuff. Are there any tools out there, any recommendations you have to help you kind of lay all that out and start organizing it?
Yeah, a couple that I use, we use a software called Asset Map. Asset Map is really cool because it doesn't take that long to be able to actually fill it out. Like I can send like a link or a QR code to somebody and really they can fill it out in 10, maybe 15 minutes and they get a good picture. Basically, it creates like a visual representation of where are things? Where's your income coming from? Where's the assets? All that type of stuff. And then obviously we want to build that picture that goes along with that. And then there's another tool that I sometimes recommend my clients use as well. I don't pay for it for my clients or anything like that, but it's called Everplans. Everplans is really cool. It goes along with more of the estate planning side of things, but it goes even beyond like financial. So you can put like medical records in there or whatever, but think of it as like a central location for all your documents. You can even put like passwords in there and everything like that, which is like most people overthink that, right? Most people overthink the, hey, if something were to happen to me, whether I pass away or something like that, or maybe I'm just gone for an extended period of time, can my wife, can my spouse, can my kids like get into this account if they need to? Most people's answer to that question would say no, right? And so
Hmm.
those are two really important tools. And honestly, I think the biggest part of that whole thing is patience. And I think that's a big part of what a financial planner can do is to say, because as I kind of mentioned, I think entrepreneurs really like to jump in the deep end, right? They're go-getters, they like to do things. Especially if you have a messy financial drawer, it's not going to happen all at once, right? And so, man, it may take a couple months, 6 months to be able to gather everything because we may know there's a life insurance policy over here. What are the specifics of it, though? We may need to call into the company, and that starts a whole new train and everything like that. So, realizing that it's a journey. It's not just, hey, we're going to do it, forget about it, and then you can call me up when, you need to review it or whatever. It's like, no, especially for more complex situations, it's an ongoing process and it's a journey. So having that expectation of the patients, I think, is absolutely huge too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But when it comes to how, I mean, you also have tools as well that you can use with our listeners, right? So could you just describe a little bit about the resources you have for our listeners and let them know where they can find it?
Yeah, I mentioned one earlier. It's Asset Map. I love Asset Map because it's something where you can like fill it out in, like I said, 10, 15 minutes and it gives you a good idea of where things are at. And then you can add so much more to it, right? You can add in, businesses and add in like business, what is the business cash flow? You can add in key persons into that business. It really can be expanded a lot quite beyond that. So that's really the central tool that we like to use because it's so simple. Like I'm not asking you to sit down for 5 hours and figure out every little thing that goes along with that. And then on top of that, we also use a tool called Orion. Orion is a tool that we use, which goes a little bit more into the weeds, but the thing that I like about it is you can connect different accounts. And as long as you do it correctly, which is again part of the job of the financial planner, it can actually track things like cash flow and everything automatically that goes along with that. So it's kind of like a QuickBooks, but on the personal side of things. And there's other tools that go along with it. We just specifically use Orion. And that's a good place to be like, okay, that's a good starting point and good foundation that we can, obviously build upon.
Love it. Guys, check out the link in the show notes to learn more about accessing this tool with Drew and more information on contacting him. Drew, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Loved it.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Every time we get on a call or a Zoom call or something like that, there's always good conversations to be had. So I just appreciate the opportunity.
Same, absolute same. Thank you so much.